Today, we have something truly special for all of you preparing for the USMLE. We are joined by one of the most respected and insightful voices in the medical community, Dr. Hafsa Shahid, PGY1 Pediatrics at the Metro Health System, Cleveland, Ohio, USA, 25 JOR research publications and 70 JOR citations, and above all, a mentor who has helped countless international medical graduates navigate the toughest phase of their journey. Today's session is all about USMLE Step 2 preparation, research fellowship, USA observationship guidance, and a best CV resume strategy. Dr. Hafsa Shahid, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you here. Let's start from our first question, that how does the approach to USMLE Step 2 differ from Step 1, and what are the most high-yield resources you recommend for Step 2, CK?
Yeah, so for me, it's been like quite a different story. Like, I just got the passion for doing USMLE from research when there was COVID time. I was in my fourth year of MBBS. So at that time, everyone was like into research and all. So that thing also developed my passion into research. So I started with research and got connected with MDs from my medical university, as I'm from King Edward Medical University. So from there, I developed this interest of USMLE, and then in final year, I cleared my USMLE step one. But then after that, I came to USA for like one of the rotations at Mayo Clinic, and after that, I got married, and I was 4 months pregnant when I gave my USMLE step two CK. After USMLE step two CK, I applied for a postdoc research position and I secured one, but the issue was visa processing. My J1 visa went into administrating professor for like 1 year, and that was the most difficult time of my MLA journey because there was so much uncertainty. You don't know what could happen the next moment. We were like, it's better to get rejected than going into AP. But finally, it came back after a year, and then me and my husband we moved to US in Boston, and also I had to leave my daughter. She was like 4 months old when I left her in Pakistan because here we were not having like enough finances to manage a baby as well. And also, if I had her with me, I won't be able to fully focus on my research career as well as my USMLE journey. So then, when I came here in June, I was not having a plan to appear in match at the very earliest, but my husband he pushed me a lot that you can do it, go for it, and I appeared for step three. In August, while I was working as a postdoc and was also doing an observership in Tampa and also preparing for step three. So I just came back from Tampa to appear in my step three, and then even between the 2 days of step three, I went to my postdoc. So I didn't have any dedicated step three prep time, but thank God it was passed. And with all this research and postdoc and all this stuff and step three, I had to manage my application as well, match application. So thank God everything worked out. My step three result was released like just 2 hours before the match deadline, and thank God it was a great thing. I just attached it with it and applied for the match. Then interview cycle and all that stuff. Then I also attended like in-person interviews as well in America. So, and then the good news came of getting matched. So that was about it. And then I left my postdoc in the end of June, then moved here into Cleveland. It's been like 2 weeks for us till we moved here, but it's been good. Yeah, it was a difficult one. So the main thing I learned from my journey is that do not give up, be persistent. And another thing that I learned is like that contacts are not everything. People say that contacts are your main key to get into US and all that stuff. Of course they are. If you have them, you can use them wisely. But if you don't have them, that's not like they are the only thing that you need. If you have persistence enough, if you have skill enough, if you are dedicated towards your goals, you don't need a shortcut to get it. You can get it even otherwise as well with your hard work, and people see that.
How does the approach to USMLE Step 2 differ from Step 1? And what are the most high-yield resources you recommend for Step 2, CK?
So I would say the main thing that differs in your step two is like the proper availability of how to say data, that from where to read. right? Because in step one, you have first aid. It gives you all the things in a systematic way, that this is to do it, this is, and then B and B, which are right along with your step one. But in step two, there is nothing like that. There is no proper textbook for that you have to do, and you can have like a guarantee that from here, uh, the questions will pop up in the exam. You don't have anything like that. So the only thing you have in step two CK, which is like the basis of your how to say preparation, is only UWorld. And also UWorld is getting very expensive these days. Like it's like 5 lakh PKR for you just to get like starting getting on it. So UWorld is the main thing I would say. But another thing I would say is like IMT app. I don't know whether you or your followers have heard about it or not, but it is, I would say it is a very cheap. If you are not sure about getting started on your prep, or you are unsure about it, like when are you gonna appear in exam, so I would say you can just get it and like keep doing it casually, because you have not spent like a fortune on this. So you can keep doing it like casually. If you are during house job or your final year, that you are busy in exams or this stuff and that stuff, you can just keep doing it casually, and it would help you a lot if you don't want to spend a fortune on UWorld. Another thing is you can get an IMD, and then at the end of your dedicated exam, you can get UWorld for like 3 months and can get hands on your UWorld. It would save you money as well. It's just like my tip. It's nothing like from IMD or something. They don't even know me. So I just used it for my step three, and I found it very helpful. I didn't spend a fortune on like my UWorld. I tried to save the money and use it toward my match. So it helped me a lot. That is why I'm just pushing the people forward so that they can at least get started. Another thing I would say really matters are the notes. Depends upon which notes you are using. Some people like have notes. I read Inner Circle notes, I think so. I'm not sure whether you have heard about them or not, but I read my like Step 2 CK 2 years ago. So that notes really helped me. Another thing that really helps is like Anki. Anki helps you in getting revision of various things if you can get the cards made on that. So it depends upon how much time are you dedicated towards your step to CK? If you are dedicating an year, you can make your own notes, you can make your own Anki cards and then revise towards it, which is the best option, I would say. But if you are like trying to do it in like 6 months, or you don't have time to make your own notes or something, you can ask for your fellows from your university people, or you can take the notes from internet people like Reddit and all the stuff. You can take notes from there, and but you would have to do the struggle of finding the notes which should suit you best, like because there is no how to say, just like in step one there is first aid which is recommended. There is nothing recommended in step two CK. Knowledge can come up from anywhere, and then can ask questions from anywhere, so nothing is for sure. One thing is like UWorld that helps you in getting hold on to stuff, and makes you assess the questions and all. So UWorld is the main backbone of the prep. And another thing I would say is your concepts in step one. Right now, past step one has like pass failed, so people don't put much effort into step one preparation. I would say don't do that, because in step two CK, your step one concepts matter a lot. In step two, you are just looking into the clinical perspective of it, but the basics are still the same as step one. So I would say still give proper time to step one. Don't just like to cram it and then get over with it. No, give proper time to it and then learn from it. Make your concepts good from it. Only then you can do well in step 2 CK. But if you would like to cram, it won't help you a lot. Even the UWorld questions won't help you a lot. So that was about step 2 CK. It is like really good for people to get started, because no one has a fortune to spend on UWorld or like towards Mahaj and all those things. Even if you are very rich, it is very expensive.
What are the most common mistakes students make during step 2 preparation?
Okay, the most common mistake people make during step to CK prep, I would say they would like to cram the stuff instead of getting into the depth of concepts. And when they like cram into the stuff, in your step to CK exam, they just change a single word and the whole concept changes behind it. And when you have crammed onto things, you just go and then see like this is what they have asked, and you just click on them. You just don't see how they have twisted the question. So I would like to say that do not cram onto things, and also do not get overwhelmed when you are just starting UWorld and you are making a very low score like 20%, 30%, 40%. That's fine. You don't know the knowledge yet. Use it and not as an assessment tool, but as a learning tool. Take the knowledge out of it, and again develop your concepts from it instead of like cramming onto stuff. Even if you make cards and all the stuff just to cram things, it won't help until you get into the depth of that concept. And also, wherever you found a new concept, just start those cards and come back to them to revise when you're going for your final, or like when you are doing the revision, just to get that concept deeply buried in your brain. So I would say this is the most common mistake that I have seen. So
How can someone find and apply for research fellowships in the US?
okay, so this is quite a hectic thing, I would say. This is not easy. You have to be very persistent towards it to secure one. It is not very easy. It does not come handy, especially these days. And also another thing I would say, the expectation of getting a paid position, you have to keep it very, very low, even if you have a very good research profile. Because here the trend has become that people can work for free, so why you are paying for them? Just like we IMGs, they people here think that this is kind of a mutual benefit. They are offering us visa and we are working for them. We are committing for them for 1 year. So I would say if you are thinking of getting a paid position, keep your expectation very, very. Of course, you can grab one. It depends on your luck, I would say. But keep your expectations very low about it. Another thing I would say how to grab one is like there are two or three methods. The one most effective that I have seen is mass emailing. Mass emailing is like you have to mail a lot of professors or principal investigators of lab, that if they have any open position, they can like contact you. You send your CV to them and show your interest in their field and attach your CV and say you can look into them, and then we can talk about it if my goals align with your research lab. So that's how this thing was on. You mail a lot of people. Where you get the email address is like you all go to the website of various big universities. Just like for the Harvard, there is a Harvard Catalyst where they have all the emails of their professors. You can just go and search. Like if you are interested in renal division, you can just go and search renal division, and it shows you a whole lot of emails. The people who are working in research, it will show you clinical research as well as lab research. So which one you are interested in, you can just take onto those and write it. Another thing that is like conflicting here is one is like specified email, personalized email, and the other one is generalized email. So what people do, they write a very generalized email and email it to a lot of people. I think there are various softwares or things like that which help you in mass emailing, like 50 people, 100 people. So people do that. Sometimes it also like helps you to never know when another person is needed. They is in need, they can even get back to your generalized email. But the preferred one thing is to do the personalized email, to show your real interest in them and to show like you have really read about them, and this is what's your understanding of their work, and this is what your goal is. So they will see that you have really invested time in them, that shows that you are dedicated towards working with them, that you are even spending time onto the research profile and everything even now. So it gives a good impression. So doing a personalized email is better than going for uh generalized email. But if like you don't have enough time, I won't say don't go for generalized email. If you want a research opportunity really bad, I would say go for even generalized email. Try whatever possible to grab an opportunity. I won't say don't do that, don't do that. If you can even grab an opportunity with a generalized email, that's good. So another thing is like using LinkedIn to apply for various opportunities. On LinkedIn, you can see various opportunities which are listed, research opportunities, and LinkedIn also shows you whichever people are working in that firm. So you can also approach them and ask them how is the work culture, how to approach people, or if they know these people who is hiring, how to approach that person, and these things. And you can also network with them once you apply, and I think that will improve your chances, if not very much, but it can, because all you need is a single chance. You need only one postdoc out of those 1,000 or 5,000 emails. So you need only one response, and that's all you need. So this is how people work. And the third thing is using contacts. the like if you have your university seniors or your brother and sisters working for postdoc, when they get matched, they are obviously going to get replaced. I would say approach them as soon as possible you hear about their match result, because as soon as their match result is out, people really approach them fast, and they have to respond as well. So they recommend whoever comes earlier. So I would suggest, or if better, you can keep in contact with people who are working on postdoc positions even before like the match result is out, like starting from December or even earlier. You can just get in contact with them. Hi, I am this person and this is my goal. I am going for match and blah blah blah. So when you text them back regarding like I am interested in postdoc, if you can recommend me at your place. So if they know you for like 3 or 4 months, they are more inclined toward recommending you instead of another person who they don't know, or who just text even after match that I am interested in postdoc, if you can recommend me. So this thing really helps. I would say start working on your connections uh, from the very start of your USMLE journey till you decide that you are going into USMLE journey. Of course, I stated that in the start that contacts are not everything, but if you are good at making them, or if you are good at using them wisely, of course, that's your edge. That's your, how to say, like a great thing that can help you in your match process. So, most of the people get, I would say the number one thing which helps people landing in postdoc is contact, because people recommend the people they know and the seats are filled, and even the PI, even if wants to keep the people out of there, they don't take them because they think that the people who are recommended, they have a vouch person for that. So they usually try to keep that person whom they know. Just like if I left my postdoc and I recommend a person, my PA would be more inclined to keep that person instead of another one from outside, even if he has good research profile or everything, because she knows that I have worked with her for 1 year. So she can rely on me, and whatever person I'm recommending, she can rely on that as well because I have recommended that person. So this is the thing, or this is the mindset of the US people. This is how the context, or how to say, recommendations are seen in the American people's eyes. That they say that someone is there to vouch for them, and if someone has a very bad experience in postdoc, of course you don't want him to recommend you, because if he would recommend you, your PI is eventually going to think that he has been bad. So the person he is recommending, it would also be bad, because of course they are friends, he knows that person, so they would be of same kind of thing. So think like this is how things work in USA. This is how contacts work in USA. But still, if you have not got contacts, that's fine. Just try mass emailing, and that would also help you in landing in a position. I'm sure. And just formulate your email in a very polite way. Just present yourself in a very polite way and show your dedicated interest toward them, so that they are more inclined towards replying to you. And also keep it short and concise, not like very long. Because if sometimes the emails are very long, people are not like they don't read the full email, and they think, of course, oh, this is person, like this is just another person who is texting me for a post position. So they just leave it. Keep it concise, keep it short, and say whatever you want to say in a clear, transparent words.
What makes a CV stand out when applying for research or residency positions?
Okay. So for the for your CV, there are a lot of components. One, I would say, is like the main thing that matters are your scores. Other than that, the thing that matters the most is your US clinical experience and how you present it. Like even there is in IRA's CV, there is an option where you can add the experience you learned from your USK or whatever. You have to add whatever you have learned in each experience, even if it's an extracurricular activity or everything. So I think that paragraph matters the most, how you present your experience. Just like if you have worked in any US hospital, how you presented that what you have learned. And also another thing that matters is like how much you have get involved with the patients. That also matters the most. Like if there is something related to cardiology, do you remember any any extra case, like how to say, any exception type of case that you see here, or a rare case that you see here, and you are like, That was really good for you, and you can mention that in your that para, because that would be really helpful. That would tell that you have really worked here and you are not making things up, and you have not got a fake things, or that's not a fake thing. I would say talk about that thing in detail as much as you can. Also, not only talk about in detail, but also mention what this experience taught you. Like if you worked in a hospital, what it taught you. Like it taught you how to be kind with your patients. It taught you uh, uh, here, another thing that matters the most is electronic medical records. You can mention about that it taught you this and you got a little insight into this thing. Of course, you don't know how to be expert at it in your observership, but if you had done that, mention that this was a good thing that I learned here, because back in my country, things are not like that. Electronic things. I don't know what about Kyrgyzstan, but in Pakistan, electronic system is not like very much in. So whenever they talk about it, what is the difference between your home country and why you are coming to US, that's another thing that you can add. That this is a great thing that I found here in my US clinical experience. So always add that thing, and always talk about like one or two cases, at least one case that you saw in that rotation, and remember it. That will help you a lot in justifying. Also, when in interview, the interviewer or PD is asking you about your US clinical experience, you can tell them that this is the patient I saw, and this really intrigued my interest toward US system and all that stuff. And you can just continue the conversation. Another thing that matters in making your CV impactful is clinical research. I would say clinical research helps a lot. At least get 3 or 4 publications under your belt before applying for match. Like keeping this area zero would be a red flag that you, because people here or the programs here really want good researchers, because as I tell you in residency, quality improvement projects are a compulsory thing that you have to do. Like it is not an optional thing, that if you want to get involved in research, that's fine. If not, that is also fine. Quality improvement projects had become like compulsory thing for you to get involved in residency. So they think if a person who has like an idea of research and all those things, in addition to all the good stuff he has in his CV, so that would be really a plus point, just like you can say an icing on the cake. Another thing I would say, get leadership roles in your medical school if possible. Like get involved in extracurricular activities, get involved in societies, and get leadership role in anything, like in any kind of society, whatever you are interested in, whether it's arts or literature or any medical related society, that's also fine. Like where I got matched, the interview, we had the total interview about the volunteer activities. He asked me, what did you do, how did you do, and be able to talk about it. Like not just adding the fake things that this is I was, because obviously they are not gonna check back into your medical school whether he was president there or not. But they have been interviewing people for like 10 to 15 years. They can judge it from your face. They can judge how do you talk about it. If you have really done things there, you can talk about it a lot. But if you have not done things, it will take time for you to make things up and to think about it, what to answer the other people. So I would say be real about whatever you are. Do not put any fake stuff in your CV. Be real, whatever it is. And even if you have graduated and now you are looking into opportunities, leadership and other things, you can still be involved in such opportunities. You can like work for postgraduate societies which are already out there. You can just approach them and get involved in those activities. You can get involved in medical camps. You can get involved in flood relief camps. That would be a very like insightful in your CV as well as in your personal statement, that this person is really passionate about providing medical care to the people who deserve, and it would really matter a lot. So get those things as well, because it helps a lot. So these are the 3 things I would say that matter the most. One is your USP, the second is your clinical research experience, and third are your volunteer activities. And how do you mention them? That's also matter the most. Just don't write like I voluntarily work there. No, mention what you learned from there. What you learned from that experience. They are not interested where you have worked. That is not going to help them. What is going to help them in their program is what you are getting away from that place, from that experience, which you can now provide in your in their program. Just like if you learn various leadership skills, you can help here in various leadership roles, because you have an experience of that things. You have an experience of leading a team. You have an experience of communicating with people. You have an experience of resolving conflicts of people. So tell that thing to them, that this experience taught you this, and you will take into residency. So that was about CV.
How to apply for observership and US clinical experience?
What I would say, I would strongly prohibit you from paying any money for anything. I forgot. It was also in my mind to say before on your CV that do not pay anything for your US clinical experience, for your personal statement services, for your CV services. I know there are very many companies out there who ask you to pay for them, and then they can write their personal statement for you. They can write your CV for you, and they can also, like, just like you said about observership, do not fall into that trap. Of course, the other way would be difficult. It won't be that much easy to grab onto such opportunities. But I would say the key I say to my juniors is that start early applying for observership. Just like you mentioned that if your step one is done and you are preparing for step two CK, and the people who are going to sit for 2027 match cycle, not the upcoming match cycle, the match cycle after that, I say people start apply for observerships now. Because when you ask for people who are offering it for free, they have a whole lot of line of people whom they have committed and they are coming each month. So usually when they are available is like 1 year after when you are applying. So when you email them and you ask them whether they are available, they say, okay, I am available in like, to this month is July, in like April 2026. So if you are going for 2027 match, you can just keep that position fixed for you. It would be obviously a good position because you are going to sit in match by September 2026. And if you can get onto this opportunity in April or May, that would be a very good thing. You can just go to USA during that time. And of course, you can just go there and network people and can grab more opportunities in your hand once you are in person there. So I would say start applying early for the observership thing and do not pay anything to people who are asking for it. They are really too much expensive and increase your USMLE cost a lot. The other thing would be mass emailing, that email a lot of people. You can get the observership emails. For that thing, I would say one thing is see into the people, into the hospitals which are offering IMGs and observership. You can go to various hospital website and see there. And another thing I would say, the LinkedIn helps you a lot. Get connected with people who are working, and then you can see whoever is observing at what place. So you can how to approach with that thing. One, you can see that at which hospital he's working. With that, whichever hospital he's working, you can see that this person takes IMGs as observers. You can see the whole lot of mails from that from the website of that hospital. Another thing that can help is you can contact that person and politely request them if he can recommend you to his preceptor, and he can like help you in grabbing a spot in any upcoming month whenever his preceptor is available. So I think so people are nice enough to do that, but even if not, you can just ask him about the preceptor, and you can ask him for the email address, and you can ask him that I won't use your contact or won't use your recommendation. I can just email that person if he's willing to have me. So this thing also helps a lot. These are like 2 to 3 ways for doing that, but you have to obviously spend time on it, but it saves you a lot of money. Mass emailing helps a lot. Another thing I would say that for the if you are looking for observership, start for those observerships at those places where there is a residency in the programs. That helps you a lot because when you leave a very good impression there, especially like September is the deadline for match, right before 2 months before it or like a month before it, when you apply for match, they are more inclined towards giving you an interview because they have seen you work with them, they have seen your work ethic, they have seen your how you treat the patients and all those things. So if you leave a good impression there, they can even offer you an interview for that. And I have seen people who have like got matched into the position where they observed. So leave a very good impression there once you do. But for the paid opportunities, they are mostly like at places which are like clinics, private clinics, and things like that. And those people don't even like delegate you for residency as well. So that won't like help you a lot. So first thing is mass emailing, I would say, just to summarize. Mass email, contact the hospital's HR persons that I'm interested in an observership. If they say that you need a doctor, that you need a doctor before starting the whole process. You need to email all the doctors who are available there, and I'm sure that out of those 100 people, one or two will reply you. I am sure of that. Even out of those 100 people, if you mail, you can get a response from at least two of them. And I would say another thing, I would say start early, as soon as possible as you are done with your step one, because you are going to get an observership after an year. There's been so much saturation, so apply early for that. Another thing is using LinkedIn for this approach. I have told you how to use your LinkedIn for that. And the third thing again is context. If you have friends who have observed some place, talk to them if they can send you the email of the preceptor, or if they can like recommend you to that person, or you can use their recommendation while emailing that person. That will help you a lot if that person has left a good impression there. If that person has left a good impression, they people would be more inclined towards having you, that it's okay, that is a good person. So this is her friend, this will also be good, so let's have her and let's see how she does in these things. So third thing is this. But again, do not pay anything. Do not pay.
In your experience, how important is it to align your research topic with future career goals or potential publications?
Okay, so I would say as a medical student, no one like expects from you to have a very good and very insightful publications. No one expect that. Everyone what expects from you is like you have an insight into research, that how to do various things of research, like how to do the writing part of research, how to write the introduction part of research, what is actually research, what are various research study types, and all of these things. That is what only people expect here from you, that you have know-how into research. No one wants you to have a publication in JAMA or Najm just to get a match or those things. People know that you are still at a very low level of your career. You have just started. So that's fine. No one expect that thing from you. And regarding if you want to ask like about other than match, just for the research thing, so I would say any publication is a good publication. It just depends upon how people perceive them, right? You have put your effort into it, and you never know which publication of yours is gonna get good citations and all. So, and I think I would say for getting good and impactful publications, get connected with MDs, like attendings or fellows who are running various groups, and they are working on various publication topics and all of that stuff. Get connected with them, and they provide mentorship. You can just talk to them that I have this topic of mine, and you can make a research proposal onto that thing, which mentioned that this is the topic, these are the available RCTs, these are the metas available. So I want to update the meta, or whatever your goal is, clear, write that clearly and send that research proposal in a Word document to that of your mentor, and that he can look into it and can guide you before you even start on the research, that whether this would be a good publication or not, or whether it could be a potential publication or not. So that thing really helps. Mentorship really helps in that, especially from fellows or attendings who have made such groups to help people. Of course, they also need publications for themselves as well, so people are there to guide you. You just have to look for them. Like I have myself really taken help from LinkedIn. It helps a lot if you can just write a post there that I'm looking for a mentor to guide me through this thing. And the people approach you themselves that I am interested in mentoring you for this project. And then you can ask them that this is my research proposal. Can you look into it and can guide us through it? So that's how thing proceeds. But as per match perspective, no one expect you to have a very high publication. They just want you to have a good know-how. Another thing, do not pay for the research publications as well. They are gonna be in your, like, they would be a red flag, because whenever an interviewer will talk to you about it, you won't be able to justify whatever you have done, right? You would have no insight into the topic, you would have no insight how the things were done. And the interviewer can identify very easily that you are making things up and you don't know about this thing. They can even identify from your face, so it would be a red flag for you. That would leave a very bad impact on them, that this person does this unethical work, and they will imagine a whole lot of bigger things, that you would be doing this unethical, that unethical. So it's better not to have any publications than buying the publications just for the sake of uh, not having anything in your clinical research section. Another thing, the people who take like paid services for personal statement as well as CV, I would discourage that as well, because when they first of all, they people write very generalized things about your personal statement and your CV. They don't go into the depth. Whatever you, of course, what you have experienced in your life, they don't know the whole story of it. Only you know whatever you have experienced. Even your parents can't even talk about it that much. Even they have lived throughout your life. So I would say write the personal statement on your own. Talk about your life experiences on your own. No one can tell about those life experiences better than you. So do it about, make it about yourself. Do it yourself, and you can take the help of seniors in reviewing those stuffs. Like again, LinkedIn can help you. Your seniors from your university can help you, or from your country can help you. In Pakistan, there is an association called Apna, APPNA, which has a Facebook page, and there people post that if anyone can review my personal statement, and really three or four people pop up in the comments, okay, I can review yours, I can review yours for free. So use those people. Don't like pay for anything, because that's not going to be helpful. Just use those people in your help, that this is and they will give you an honest review. Then the people who you are paying, they would just like to get done with it. So take the help from there and do things on your own. Make your CV on your own. Spend your time on doing your things, and believe me, it would benefit you a lot instead of just paying and getting done with it. Another thing I would like to add here is the timeline of Step 2 CK. So I would say that you can get done with your Step 1 in like your fourth year MBBS, like right before your professional exam or right after, because Step 1 contains the knowledge till your fourth year of MBBS. You can get it done before your professional exams if you are good in prep, or you can get it done after your professional exam, whatever comfortable for you. And the same thing goes for your Step 2 CK. Step 2 contains all the knowledge of your final year that would really help you in your final year exams as well. Believe me when I say that. So you can get done with your Step 2 CK. If you have good prep, you can go right before your professional exam. Even a month before would be good enough. And if you are a little bit like having a doubt about it, you can just go right after your professional exam. You can just get done with your final year professional exams. Then most of us get a leave of 1 or 2 months. I don't know, it varies university by university. When you result it out and you are going to start for your internship or house job, so there's a like a gap of 1 month or 2 months, so you can sit dedicatedly and prepare for your Step 2 CK in that time, and can get it done before starting your internship or house job. So again, to conclude about the Step 2 CK stuff, I would say UWorld is the main thing that helps you a lot. And if you have got enough time, make your own notes, make your own Anki cards, because you know what is your weakness and you can really help in that. But if you are trying to get it, manage it with some other things, like with research or with final year or some other things going on in your personal life, you can also use notes from your friends, or like the notes that are very available on Reddit. If you go through it and you find them, they are good enough for your Step 2 CK, they are helping you in managing your U world, you can take that and you can just study from there. So this was the thing about Step 2 CK, and then you appear in your assessment. If you are scoring whatever your goal is, then that's fine to appear in USMLE Step 2 CK. But the ideal deadline, I would say, would be soon after your final year professional exam, or soon before your final year professional exams. This would be the ideal deadline, so that you can just also for the USK, the ideal timeline would be soon after you are done with your Step 1. So while you are prepping for your Step 2 CK, you can spare half an hour daily to write 5 or 6 emails each day. So you can get your observership in your hand soon after you are like done with your Step 2. You can just have your visa in your hand and you can just live for observership as soon as you are done with your Step 2, and that will really help you guys a lot. So that was about the timeline. So, guys, the main key that I would say is stay persistent. Do not give up on this path. It is, if you have got into it, God has some plans for you. So, just stick to it, and the ways become more clearer as you proceed. And the other thing I would say, just do not rely on context. Do not think that contexts are everything. You can do things out of context as well. Just give your best and pray to Allah, of course. God will make ways for you, but stay persistent and just do not rely on context. Don't think that context and everything are all of that stuff. I also thought the same thing and heard the same thing on my whole USMLA journey path, that you do not have context, you are not going to get matched. But I matched without any context. Believe me, even one of my interview was not because of context. Even single of my observation was not because of context. So if I can make it, you can also make it. And also, do not try to make your how to say, your normal daily life routine as an excuse to save yourself from USMLE things. I did mine with marriage and with having a daughter. So if I can do it, even in pregnancy, I gave my USMLE step to CK. So if I can do it, you can also do it. Just stay persistent towards it. Stay, believe in your goals. Do not give up over it. And that's it. And I am hopeful that you all will make it one day and will meet in USA.
It's been an honor learning from someone so deeply committed to the field. I truly appreciate your time and guidance, and I hope our paths cross again. Best wishes and good luck in everything ahead.